Erased Destiny. Chapter 4. Camping in the Swamps. After a wet and not too cold winter came an equally wet and misty spring. Clouds often obscured the sky, and a strong wind discouraged people from leaving their homes. In spite of the inclement weather, Merigold walked each day the 2 hours distance between home and Sintra, and Jargon was taken by his parents. If Joanna was not traveling with him, Jargon visited the local carpenter. If she accompanied, he took his lessons only etiquette, architecture, and winemaking. The process of making wine was far more complicated than Jargon had imagined. Learning how to care of the vines alone occupied him all his afternoons and seemed endless, but it brought many positive changes in the boy's life. He was often in Sintra, where he happened to see Merigold. He gained some freedom, freed himself from boring or tiresome activities. Whenever he felt like it, he would lock up in his room and there study various tomes. Between gardening books, he would smuggle ones describing wooden constructions, especially ships. When his parents left him home alone, instead of lazing by the river, Jargon would plan boards, debark stumps, or hack with a chisel. If he went to the river, it was only to see if his first creations would float. The only person who forced Jargon to move his body was Torden. Despite his students' complete lack of enthusiasm, Warrior did not give up on teaching his lessons. He was looking for a way to reach the boy, and if not teach him to fight, then at least to improve his strength and dexterity. Unfortunately, in terms of physical fitness, Jargon was inferior to most of his peers, not just athletic Merigold. The heavy barrels Merigold had to move, the buckets of water she constantly carried, the forced position to which she was not accustomed to, all this tired her out more than the daily marches and negatively affected her health. Her agreement with Amanda was simple. For every day of work, Merigold earned 4 coppers, and she was obliged to work at least every second day. That is why, whenever she felt overwhelmed by her duties, she went to Topaz instead of Sintra. She did not admit to her parents that the hunter had taught her fishing, archery, and how to set snares. She did not admit that, at his request, she tracked aurochs, settled accounts with the quartermaster at the town hall on his behalf, and finally informed him of new orders posted on the hunting board. Usually it was the chasing away of predators, removing rats from someone's barn, nothing interesting in general. Sometimes Merigold would wander through the woods, looking for paths along which she had not yet walked. Each new tree, each new cavity brought a smile on the girl's face. In the evenings, if she had enough strength, she continued to study the herbal lexicon in the hope of one day becoming a healer. Lying on the bank of the stream, she imagined herself an adult, independent woman with a bow slung over her shoulder and a bag of herbs attached to the belt of a pretty dress. For spinning and weaving, she had no patience or manual aptitude, but she was not bad at preparing dyeing soups. She experimented with concoctions and usually managed to get the color she wanted.
Can you ride a horse?
A little.
For a few coppers you can borrow a mount. We ran out of waterlash, calamus, redwood bark, marzipan flowers.
By evening, Merigold had inventoried the dyer's ingredients and left Sintra with a long list on a piece of paper. She was walking along a familiar road, so she didn't look around. She was given money for renting a horse and also leather sacks for the ingredients. It would take 3 days to reach the marshes on foot, so borrowing a horse from Jargon seemed the only solution. Plus, it was for free, so after return she could buy a new shoes for herself and Rose.
Goldie. Hey. Merigold.
What are you doing here? Are you riding cross-country? Won't your horse shy away?
Let's hope not. I saw you from the road and thought I'd take you home. You must be very tired.
Nice of you, but I am fine. Just take the bags. It's uncomfortable to walk with them.
She handed the bags to the boy and walked beside his horse. Jargon didn't know how to act. The silent, calm Merigold did not fit the image he remembered. He thought she must be really tired if she didn't feel like talking. He dismounted from the mare and gave Merigold the reins, but the girl eluded him, veering off the path. She stopped immediately, however.
I don't know how to ride a horse. Is it very difficult?
It is not, unless you intend to race. Try it on Patch. Please.
He slipped the reins into her hands once more. Merigold did not move from her place. She looked at the horse, then at Jargon himself.
Will you need a horse tomorrow? Could I borrow him and try to ride in my backyard?
It's not him, it's her. Patch. Say hello to her. Horses are not objects, you know. They need to be looked after. Tended to.
Merigold looked at Patch again. She was sure that Jargon had never cared for a horse. They hired stablemen for some reason. She pretended to listen to Jargon's words. She was more interested in Patch's eyes, dilated with fear, perhaps surprised to see someone new.
Does someone at your house know how to ride? Perhaps your father.
Merigold confirmed, and handed the reins back to her friend, and continued on her way. Jargon's penchant for complicating the simplest things annoyed her. She had no time to listen to unnecessary information. She wanted to go to bed as soon as possible, maybe to practice with her sword for a few minutes before going to bed. She was too tired for reading or doing anything else.
Are you getting on or not?
He gave his friend a leg up to take a seat in the saddle. Merigold's dress went up, so he looked away. He tried to look at the mare's muzzle, at the road ahead of them.
The most important thing is not to panic. Horses sense fear. Don't make sudden movements so you won't fall down.
I feel strange, sitting so high. I would save a lot of time if I could ride. And if I owned a horse, of course. Are they very expensive?
I don't know. But I can ask. Gather the reins. Otherwise, Patch won't go in the desired direction.
Merigold bucked the reins, and the mare stood toe to toe. The startled girl slid to the ground.
Why don't you practice riding in our yard? We have plenty of space and I could show you a thing or two. Now it is a bit too dark.
I'd rather your parents don't see me. I promise to return the horse intact.
I'm worried about you, not Patch. As long as you practice in closed area. I don't want to chase after my mare for a few days.
The girl moved away from the panicked mount to what she thought was a safe distance, 3 lengths of her yard. She decided it would be better to go to the marshes with an adult, preferably on the same horse. As Patch calmed down, Merigold approached her. She wanted to stroke the mare's neck, but the mare snorted at her. The animal moved as far away from the girl as possible.
I don't think she likes you.
Will you drop my bags off at my house? I need to do something right now.
She disappeared between the trees. Jargon was left at the edge of the forest alone, with his horse and Merigold's bags. Whenever he tried to spend some time with Merigold, the girl dismissed him. Always busy, always on the run. He wanted to clarify the situation, so he followed Merigold into the forest.
Good evening.
Good evening. Today you are quite late. Is everything all right?
Yeah, sure. I had a lot of work today, that's all. I need to get to the marshes and I can't ride a horse.
To the marshes? A long way to go. Will your parents let you go?
Merigold liked Topaz because he took everything she said seriously. He did not criticize. He did not try to lecture her. If he could, he offered advice, but unobtrusively, more in a friendly way than from the position of a life-experienced adult. She followed with her eyes, the man's fingers fixing the feathers on the ends of the arrows.
Goldie, Will you have dinner with us?
The hunter's wife stepped outside in an airy white dress. In Merigold's opinion, that outfit was better suited to the bedroom, possibly for a late-night summer stroll. She shook her head. Lena usually wore clothes not warm enough, as if she didn't feel cold. Merigold thought that maybe she was a vampire, but then again, she shook her head. Vampires were infertile, and Lena gave birth to Nicodeme.
Thank you, but I will be going home. My parents are probably worried about me by now. Has Nico fallen asleep?
He's been asleep for 2 hours now. Learning how to walk is clearly making him very tired.
The woman went to fetch water, and Merigold stayed in the courtyard with Topaz. Jargon secretly observed the conversation. He saw Topaz few times in Wolf's Room and few times more in Sintra, but didn't feel like making acquaintance with a mere hunter. Because of Merigold, he saw Topaz in a different light.
I need a lot of plants that only grow in wetlands. One way my friends could teleport me, but coming back with bags full of ingredients for 3 days doesn't appeal to me.
You can get to the marshes on horseback in less than a day, as long as you don't fall off, your horse doesn't run away. I rode 6 hours. Count a minimum of 2 days for the whole trip.
Could I practice riding on your horse? Is it a calm horse or a vicious one?
In my opinion, Bolt is very calm and well-mannered, for a horse of course. Come early in the morning. I'll saddle Bolt for you. Make sure you're not dead by the time I get back and go fishing.
Merigold thanked him and headed for home. Jargon felt betrayed by his only friend. Not only had Merigold not told him the truth, she preferred to learn riding horse from someone else. Silently, he followed Merigold all the way to her house. He did not dare to speak to her again. He watched the girl enter the house and close the door behind her. Merigold's family was already asleep, as no light was on inside. The household had become accustomed to Merigold's perpetual absence. They left her supper on the table, and next to it, they put provisions for the next day, and that was all. Abella washed Merigold's clothes regularly, but she did not have to stitch them up so often anymore. The girl ate the prepared meal, cleaned up the dishes, and went to bed. She tried not to inhale the unpleasant smell of alcohol wafting through the house. Since they had enough money for food, Raglan started to drink regularly. The coppers earned by Abella enabled him to pay Cyril for the land he rented, and he no longer had to do serfdom. The excess of free time was clearly damaging Raglan's health. Instead of finding paid employment, like the rest of the family, or till more land, the man spent his days emptying pints of beer, either alone or in the company of his neighbors. Jargon returned home with Merigold's sacks strapped to his saddle. He deliberately did not return them, so that in the morning he would have an excuse to pay his friend a visit. He was surprised by Merigold's recklessness, her confidence in her own abilities, her bravery or stupidity. Unable to ride a horse, the girl decided to begin her training with a 2-day trip to the marshes, where she had never been before. Jargon remembered that swamps were inhabited by many predators, among which the most dangerous were triheads. Countless stories of the hazards threatening his life filled Jargon's thoughts. His mother never missed an opportunity to preach about the perils lurking outside their home. Despite so many warnings and prohibitions, Jargon searched intensely for a reason why he had to go to the marshes, preferably within a few days, and why his parents could not accompany him.